Welcome back. Yes, it's still Christmas Eve. I like to drum that into my head such that afterwards, you can get back out there with your friends and family and do what you have to do. But now we're talking about COVID. And we've got Dr. Chikwe Hekwazu, the DG of NCDC, joining us this morning. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. Well, compliments of the season, by the way.
Good morning.
Okay, so
thank you very much.
In consideration of in consideration of where we are at the moment with COVID and how we're trying to ensure things are done properly, what is your greatest concern now?
Thank you, Chamberlain, and good morning. Hi, Ayo. My greatest concern, I would say, I just listened to my brother, the Corps Marshal of the Federal Road Safety Corps, and I think that the risk perception around the challenge that we face on viruses is so difficult. If your house is on fire or there's a fire somewhere, you can see it, and Nigerians will understand the risk they face by going towards the fire. If there's an incident, a road traffic accident, people perceive that risk because they can visualize it. If you hear that there's been a criminal activity somewhere on a road, you can visualize what it means. But for us, it's been so difficult narrating to Nigerians the risk they have to perceive with a small thing called a virus that nobody can see, and therefore no one can really understand the gravity of the risk that they face. And therefore it's much easier to rationalize it or to put it into the box of, do I believe or don't I believe that this is real? So as we come to the end of the year, and as I reflect on the very difficult year we've had as a country, again, we will try to raise awareness of Nigerians of this global threat that we're facing, caused by a new virus, and the harm it has caused our country, its people, and our economy, not just here in Nigeria, but globally, and how we can think of how to mitigate this risk collectively, because you can only pool forces, join forces to fight a risk where you believe there's one. So again, this is our challenge this Christmas period, New Year's period, and even into the next year, is to really find a narrative that will convince Nigerians that this is an existential threat. And once that is done, I think we can mobilize ourselves to meet that challenge. But, again, we will try, as we've been doing throughout the year, to demonstrate the risk that we face, and therefore build with Nigerians the defense structures that we need. This is not something that can come out of NCDC or out of the Presidential Task Force. We can only succeed in this if we collectively have a single narrative of the risks that we face and how we can confront.
Well, Doctor, something that you have said, and which a good number of people have also alluded to, is risk communication. We've had a risk communication officer here in the studio in the course of this year talking about the same COVID-19. And it'll seem that that's where the major challenge is. What are these specific issues? What are the things that people are missing? Maybe I can hazard a kind of suggestion, or rather, is it a scenario? Well, we had a conversation with a consultant, Dr. Alero Roberts. Her opinion, when I asked the question, could it be that because we have very, very low fatality rate for this disease, that's making people to say, maybe it's not that serious, maybe it's not as difficult, maybe it's not as bad as it looks. Could this be part of the challenges of the risk communication?
Therein lies our challenge, is do we want to see bodies lying on the roads before we understand the severity of the illness that we face? This is a numbers game. the more cases you have, the more severe cases you have, and the higher your risk of death. Every day, Nigerians watch TV, those that can afford the channels streaming live from other countries in the world, and we see the number of deaths happening in those countries, despite their very sophisticated health care infrastructure. So we just can't afford to get to those numbers, because the mortality rate in Nigeria will be a lot higher because of the deficits that we know we have in our healthcare provision infrastructure. So this is the singular reason why we are having so much on prevention, because our healthcare system, our healthcare capabilities at federal, state, and local level will just not be able to handle the cases in their numbers as we're seeing in other countries. We're working very hard to improve on this. The federal government is doing so, but these things take time. So we don't want to get to that stage. But it's almost like between a rock and a hard place. And I agree with my dear friend Alero, who made that, got to that conclusion. But having said that, Ayo, the thing is that it's Nigeria, obviously, when we present that data for the country, this is an average across our 200 million people. If you do the numbers as a part of the population in just Lagos or FCT, the states with the higher burden of cases, you will realize the impact of this on lives of people. It's been catastrophic. And that is why also sometimes I think the risk awareness is higher in those states where they've had a higher burden of infection so far. So we want to prevent this from spreading across the country, and which is why we've started a campaign called Celebrate Responsibly towards this end of the year, just to remind people of the collective responsibility that we have, even if this is the end of the year and people are tired from a very difficult year, to hold on just a little bit more, call on our best intentions, but also call on local leaders, leaders of churches, leaders of families, leaders of organizations, to hold each other accountable for these things and to really enforce this regulation, self-regulatory behavioral changes that we need to do to prevent transmission.
But Doctor, we have been talking to people over the past, how many months now? We have been talking to people, and it doesn't seem, to be getting there. But specifically speaking, of course, you were there when the chairman of PTF COVID-19 spoke and said that there is that conversation with states. And so the question then is, what kind of conversations are you having with the states in terms of their communication and especially the enforcement? In Lagos, that has begun. There was just one day they arrested about 500 people for not wearing the non-pharmaceutical prevention items that have been provided, that have been prescribed by the NCDC and other authorities at that level. So what kind of conversations are you having with the states to ensure that we can sustain the interventions that you have proposed to them?
So thank you. Right after that event where the chairman of the Presidential Task Force spoke, we had a meeting that evening with a subcommittee of the National Economic Council made up of a select group of governors with whom we interface. And that point was made very strongly to the governors. And in fact, Their Excellencies, the governors of most of the states in Nigeria, really are taking this seriously. Many of them, unfortunately, have been infected themselves. So they are taking this seriously. And you alluded to the critical steps now taken by His Excellency, the Governor of Lagos State. The same has happened in the Federal Capital Territory, and even in Kaduna has taken very stringent measures. Over the past few months, we've really tried considering the economic realities of our time, the very difficult time this has been for people, for small businesses, and try to give responsibilities to individuals to make these decisions and to carry out this action. But as we've gone into this second wave, we've found that it's not enough. Many of us are simply for some reason, not strong enough to do these things and do it consistently. We let go, when you say, yes, I'll distance, but the next thing you get an invitation and there's a draw to attend that particular wedding. And it's that one time that we let down our guard and allow ourselves then to go for that one wedding that we then get infected. And really, that's the risk that we're facing. Many people are getting infected from small gatherings of people coming together in social events for all sorts of reasons. So what we have done is ask the state government, please, enforce some of these measures with where you have you're able to around event centers, around restaurants, so that we minimize the appeal for individuals to make these decisions, and we have the decisions made for them, especially at this time of the year where there's a natural increase in events like that. And so that we don't go into 2021 with a full-blown crisis. And that's really what we're trying to achieve. Because if we don't do this, there's no other way of keeping our economy open. What we're doing is really a measure to prevent the use of harder tools, to prevent more comprehensive tools being used. So we're trying to say, listen, can we mitigate the risk by doing these things here and there? Yes, it will be painful for some small businesses, but this is the only way you can stay open in the long run. And this is something we've now, Their Excellencies, the governors of many states across the country, are doing with different levels of implementation efficiency, but definitely, I think they've all come to realize that there's simply no other way. We've got to enforce this at the state level. That's where the instruments of government allow for enforcement to happen.
Well, speaking about states, we'd like you to listen to this.
And healthcare service delivery, worth just 4.7 billion. Now, let's extrapolate. If we are going to expend 540 billion in the purchase of vaccine, let me just simply give you this analysis. In Kogi State today, we are building a multi-billion naira hospital that is going to have every equipment you can ever think of in terms of medical and healthcare service delivery, worth just 4.7 billion. Now, let's extrapolate. If we are going to spend 10 billion naira per health institution that will cater for a more deadly disease, not COVID-19 that has 99.9 chances of recovery rate, a more deadly disease that are killing every day, if we expend just 10 billion only, and 10 billion put in Nigerian factor, let me put it that way, and taxes, we are going to have 54 of such. Every state power will have one each. FCT can have up to 2, Lagos can have up to 2, Kano can have up to 2, and some other major cities can have up to 2. No disease we will not be able to cure in this country. From CBN, analysis sometimes back, 3.5 trillion expended so far on COVID and COVID-related matters. We don't need to have gone through that route. In one of these, our sessions in the National Economic Council meeting, there was this issue that came up regarding infrastructure, road infrastructure in the country. I'm sure you know Mr. President care about Nigerians so much that he continued to emphasize on infrastructure building of infrastructure, and he's doing much within the little resources available to him. But in order to take it further and faster, we suggested that a committee be set up under the leadership of Governor Nasir Ahmed El-Rufai, and this committee did a wonderful job. This committee comprises of some governors, including CBN themselves. And they came up with just a report that's, in summary, that requires only 2 billion only to fix major commercially viable roads in the country.
Well, it appears it doesn't subscribe to the single narrative intention or desire that you had initially highlighted to ensure we pull on the same page. How do you progress from that?
So thanks, Chamberlain. My role as the leader of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control is not to join debate in terms of resource allocation at the federal and state level. That's the responsibility of our elected leaders. And my role is to advise them on a public health and health security threat, both in Nigeria and globally. We've seen currently the largest economy in the world, literally fighting with this virus, has over 300,000 deaths so far. Nothing makes them better than us, right? So that we're not having the number of deaths today in Nigeria doesn't mean we will not have them tomorrow if we don't do what is necessary to prevent that. As far as I understand, the numbers quoted there for the vaccination efforts are not in sync with my understanding of what will be necessary in the next few months. This is really not my area of responsibility, so I won't get into the details. But ultimately, my view on this is you can't enjoy infrastructure if you're not alive. You cannot go on great roads. You can't live in beautiful buildings. You can't even enjoy the facilities in a great hospital if you are not alive. So how do we prevent illness? The focus on the work that we do in public health, and which is a globally accepted norm, is that prevention is by far better and by far cheaper than any curative effort. So our responsibility here is to prevent as many Nigerians as possible from getting this illness. And that's what I am completely 100% focused on. Every Nigerian across every state in Nigeria, working with their excellencies, the governors of all the states. And this is our role. This is what we'll continue to do. And the responsibility for a resource allocation will remain with our elected leaders as they're elected to do.
So, speaking about the vaccine, is it your office that is going to coordinate in terms of when they receive, and what are the considerations? Because you have so many people yesterday who told us, whoa, I'm not sure I'm going to take this vaccine, even if it arrives here. What's the consideration?
First thing, let me answer your second question. If there's one vaccine that arrives in Nigeria and that's the only thing I have to do, I will take it. This is really an existential question. The agency responsible for delivery of these vaccines is the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency. Of course, the Presidential Task Force will provide the leadership for this activity like it does for all of us, together with the Federal Ministry of Health and the Honorable Minister of Health. I think the question of whether we will accept the vaccine is an important one, and we're going to work very hard to educate all Nigerians on the benefits of this vaccine. Listen, Chamberlain, no medical intervention, not one, has saved more lives since the beginning of mankind than vaccination. So no great hospital, no surgery, no medicine, not even antibiotics has saved more lives than vaccines. The vaccines are simply the miracle of medicine that has saved so many people, prevented illness, and today continues to prevent illness. We've just celebrated, in between this pandemic, the elimination of polio in Nigeria and in the rest of the continent. Just 2 countries now in the world have wild polio virus circulating. We completely eliminated smallpox through the efforts of humans, so through vaccination efforts. So vaccines are a simple miracle, and the work done by scientists to lead on the development of a vaccine in 10 months, is on the realms of science fiction. So we're going to work very hard to educate Nigerians on the benefits of vaccines, the opportunity it gives us to return to our lives, our normal lives. And that's what's going on around the country right now. FPHCD is leading on ensuring that we have the logistics for distribution, we have the leadership at the state level to ensure that we understand how, where, and through which resources these vaccines will be delivered to our people, and also planning a communications effort to make sure that people understand. My final point on this, Chamberlain, is to be honest, by the time we get this vaccine, sometime in the first quarter of next year, there'll be hundreds of millions of people that would already have received this vaccine. And so, there's a lot of, there are a lot of narratives about possible harm. If there's anyone that's still skeptical in March, April, he would look around the world and see people that have received the vaccine and then are beginning to return to life as normal. And really, this is where we want to focus our efforts now. This year, 2020, has really been the year of coronavirus, unfortunately. We want to make 2021 the year of delivery an effective vaccine rollout in Nigeria. And I'm absolutely confident in the leadership of the health sector, the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, and the Presidential Task Force in leading us through that.
While I do not wish to be a downer on this, Dr. Hikazu, you would remember that, even though we celebrate that we do not have poliomyelitis in Nigeria anymore, wild poliovirus, as you said, if we remember how long it took us to persuade everyone to take this, this polio vaccine, we know that our work is cut out for us. Just as you have said, Dr. Ali also said the same thing yesterday, that the major challenge would be persuading people. What are the challenges you foresee about persuading people to take these vaccines, and how are we approaching the communication?
You're absolutely right that our work is cut out for us. And we have to be proactive about this. We have to really explain and engage with Nigerians, understand their fears, understand their anxieties, and respond to them. Right now, all around the world, the most famous pictures circulating are of people getting this vaccine. The emotion I feel the most is a desire to be in that position, to have this shot of life given to me in my hand. So our responsibility collectively, not just as leaders of the public health response in Nigeria, but all leaders, religious, cultural, media leaders, we have to collectively use our voice intelligently in educating the public. Let me say one thing about the work you do, Ayo. In the media, when you have let's say an election, you often have to bring in, people from both sides of an argument to make a case to the public, because you have a responsibility for fairness. I think in science, there's a responsibility to air, what is scientifically accurate and reasonable, and be on the side of science in communicating to people on what we know works for them. So I'm looking forward to working with you. Our leaders are looking forward to doing the same thing, to really use the knowledge that we have responsibly and educate people responsibly on the benefits of vaccination, not just for health. Health is the primary outcome, but on our economy, on our way of life, on returning. Nobody wants to tell people not to travel for Christmas. I want next year to go back to living a normal life. And this is our license. This is our one opportunity to return to that. If not, as hard as we try with these non-pharmaceutical interventions, the masking, the distancing, as hard as we try, we can mitigate the impact, we can reduce transmission, but we will not be able to eliminate this virus without the vaccine. It's very unlikely that we can do that. We've seen in many countries that thought, even island countries that thought that they had gotten beyond this, see reintroductions happening and circulation happening again. So we absolutely need this vaccine next year. And it's the collective will of government to do everything possible to get as many vaccines into this country and get it into the arms of Nigerians. Because it's only when people actually get vaccinated, not by the vaccines, not the vaccines being procured. It's actually when we get people vaccinated that we have a chance of getting ahead of this difficult virus.
All right, then, we do thank you for your time this morning, Dr. Chikwe Ihekwazu, DG of NCDC.
Thank you very much.